People with obesity could be encouraged to lose weight by being offered extra housing and council tax benefits. Westminster Council is considering proposals to use smart cards to monitor gym attendance for those prescribed exercise by their GP and then reward or penalise them with welfare payments. Sky's senior news correspondent Ian Woods has more.
Westminster in the heart of London. Home of royalty, Prime Minister and politicians, and some of Britain's wealthiest people. But there are parts of Westminster which are just the same as the rest of the country, and the local council is just as worried as everywhere else about the rise in obesity levels. It encourages people to use its leisure facilities by offering cheap rates to those on benefits, including free use of their swimming pools. But now it's considering an idea which would go a step further.
The suggestion is that if a doctor prescribes an exercise regime to an obese patient, then their attendance at council-run leisure centres like this could be monitored. And if they fail to show up regularly, then their housing or other benefits could be docked.
Smart cards track how often people use the leisure centre. The council has been trying to encourage bold new initiatives because local authorities will take over responsibility for public health policy come April.
What we can't do is to continue to spend, as a country, over £5 billion a year on obesity. We need to do things. We're starting that debate. There are lots of interesting sort of ideas, some of which will go absolutely nowhere, but we think there are some ideas that will go somewhere. And what I can say is doing nothing is certainly not an option.
In New York, the mayor is already legislating to stop the sale of supersized sugary drinks. But even the author of this report isn't sure whether his ideas will be taken up by councils.
We're saying that these are tools that individual councils across the country can use to decide about how they incentivise their citizens. That will look different in different parts of the country. Different councils will have very different political views on this. Some won't want to touch it with a barge pole. Others will want to really incentivise people very hard. Others will want to reward people.
But poverty campaigners say that targeting those who perhaps can't afford the freshest, healthiest food is both unfair and unworkable.
The evidence shows that people need to be goal-oriented themselves, and successful health programs show that that is the best way to work with them, rather than trying to force something on them and then they become suspicious and they may waste money if they do it that way.
It's unclear whether politicians will really have the stomach to punish people for their weight by hitting them in the pocket. Ian Woods, Sky News.
Well, I'm joined now by Rowan, the chairman of the Obesity Management Association. Good evening to you. Thank you for joining us. It's a really interesting debate, this, isn't it? And I suppose some would say another instance of the nanny state trying to tell us how we should live our lives. Shouldn't obese people make the decision themselves? They know the risks.
There does seem to be a tendency for politicians to assume that you can legislate and then change people's behaviour. And really the facts don't bear that out. Certainly if you look at what's happened so far, we've really seen no improvement in obesity in the last 5 years. And yes, it seems crazy to try and suggest that we can pass some new regulations that are going to change all that now.
But as we heard in the piece, doing nothing is not an option. So what should the approach be?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is to avoid just vilifying obese people. It's very easy to imagine that they're all Wayne and Waynetta slobs sitting at home there on the couch. The reality is a lot more complex than that. There was a study recently that tried to map out on a single diagram all the different factors that influence obesity, and it ended up looking like the wiring diagram of a telephone exchange. It is a really complicated subject. So I think the important point is we have to engage with obese people. We have to get them to take some ownership of the problem and then hopefully to commit to getting some help with it, because one way or another at the moment the public purse is going to bear the cost of this problem, whether that's in unemployment benefit or in long-term health problems down the road.
It's really interesting hearing you talk about vilification there, because over the summer Boris Johnson was linking obesity to moral weakness, problem of affluence, and even connecting obesity to rising debt levels. Do you think we are beginning to vilify those who are seriously overweight?
Yes, and I think we're just coming at it from the completely wrong angle, because what the Americans have now done, where the problem is even worse than it is here, is their medical authorities have recognized that obesity is a disease that needs a medical treatment plan. Now, so far, that hasn't happened here. There's some rumblings about it. The Royal College of Physicians is now suggesting we should have an obesity consultant in every hospital, which is a step in the right direction. But until we recognize that this is a medical issue that needs a medical treatment, we're just throwing slogans at it rather than solutions.
But I suppose the flip side of that coin, if we are looking at it as a disease, is to say, well, haven't the council got a point? If someone is diagnosed with cancer, we expect them to religiously attend their chemotherapy sessions. If the treatment plan that is given is exercise, don't the council have a point? Shouldn't people be expected to attend those gym sessions even if they don't want to, and shouldn't they be penalised if they don't?
It's an oversimplification of the problem. I think it's fair to say that morbidly obese people are not going to suddenly don their trainers and go for a jog along Victoria Embankment. That is just not going to happen. The reasons they got where they are complicated. A lot of it is to do with behavioural change. And until we can get them to actually buy into that and make some behavioural change, we're not going to see any solutions. So I think we have to be very careful to suggest that it's somehow their fault and it's the old eat less, exercise more syndrome, which is what doctors have been saying for a long time. But if we don't actually get people to change the way they think and to recognise it as their own problem, we're not going to see them actually stay on the treatment programs that will give them a solution.
Yeah, and I suppose, is there a danger if people are getting their benefits withdrawn, benefits that help them deal with the condition, their health then worsens and the NHS is left to pick up the bill?
Well, there's no doubt at all that most of these people will end up with things like coronary heart disease or type 2 diabetes if they're not treated. And the objective for all of us is to get them fit and well and back to work and active members of the community. So I think the way to do that is to first of all get them to recognise as a problem, because a lot of obese people still don't see that they have a problem. And we're launching a campaign in Parliament in a couple of weeks' time to get people to take more ownership of their problem, to know their BMI, for example, their body mass index, for themselves and their children. And if they know they have a problem, then we can say, well, there are ways we can help you. But until they buy into it, and there's so much evidence from programs we're already running, that unless they're committed to it, the program will not be successful for them. So we need to get them to take that ownership. And that's the only way we can avoid really having both the NHS and the local authority budgets being absolutely decimated by the cost of obesity treatment in years to come.
So do you think there's any benefit to any of this? If the stick doesn't work, is it possible that increasing benefits by saying, look, if you stick to the type of things that will help you, whether that's an exercise plan or something else, is there any credence to that?
I think that it's normal human behaviour to go after a reward and to seek to benefit from that. Certainly I think it's more effective than the stick treatment and the threats. But I think in many ways that will come automatically, because once people start to lose even a small amount of their weight, they will feel so much better in themselves. They get into a virtuous circle, and that leads into better behaviour that often leads them to decide for themselves to take action to get back into work and so on. So I think, yeah, if there's some ways we can encourage them with additional benefits once they've shown that they're committed and are achieving some progress on a plan, that's great. But we must avoid oversimplifying this. These people need medically supervised programs to treat what is a medical condition, a medical disease.
But anyone who's tried to lose even a few pounds knows how hard it is to try and shift the weight. So wouldn't it be helpful to do what they've done in the States, take temptation out of people's way by, for example, limiting the sale of supersized drinks?
Potentially, yes. I mean, it depends how far we want to go with that sort of nanny state approach.
Yeah.
Again, you're legislating to try and change behaviour. It's a little bit like saying we'll have a law against anorexia or something. It's a very strange concept. You have to change the way people think and act around food, and sadly that is a rather more complex problem than most politicians would like it to be. We can't just flick a switch and make it go away. We have to actually talk to people, engage with them and change their behaviour over a period of time and under medical supervision.
It's a fascinating subject. Rowan from the Obesity Management Association, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.